Good morning and welcome to Siili's first ever digital experience Spring Summit. My name is Andreas Strandman. I'm the head of DX at Siili and I'm your host today together with Antti, my colleague, who will introduce himself shortly. We were supposed to be here also with the radiant Leena Viitanen, but unfortunately she had to cancel on last minute, so it's just the two of us today. But yeah, today's event is quite spectacular for a couple of reasons. First of all, we've had more than 1,000 registrations, and we're really grateful, of course, for all their interest, and super happy to see participants from not only Finland, where we're currently live, but also all the corners of Europe and some from the USA as well. I really hope that all of you could make it despite the challenging time zone for some of you. Secondly, we recently renewed our strategy, focusing really on digital experience as our spearhead for growth. And today is the day when we broadly broadcast all our wide experience in this area through a number of really insightful presentations by our colleagues and some guest speakers. But yeah, Antti would probably like to set the stage now and talk us through today's agenda.
Yeah, also on my behalf, you are warmly welcome to this summit. It was great to hear that there are actually over 500 people participating all over Europe, so it's an international event.
It's huge.
Yeah, and my name is Antti Kiukas and I am the head of marketing and communications here at Siili, and I am super excited about the next 3 hours as we've been now preparing them for more than 2 months and especially to make it worth your while. And we thought with Andreas that as we're going to have a lot of different kind of talks related to digital experience, we would give all the audience some sort of a uniform frame from which you can actually investigate the subject and get the insights all into one picture. So let's look at the frame. Apparently my mic doesn't work, so we continue with a new mic. So I'm just going to repeat that we decided that we give you a uniform frame from which you can actually observe the whole event. And now we take a look into the frame. So this is the Spring Summit frame, and what you can do at home is you can basically just as we have finished the whole frame, you can take a screenshot out of it and you can always come back to it once you are making notes of all the talks. But what it takes to build exceptional digital experiences. Of course, everything should start with the end user of the experience. So when thinking about, for example, the work that we do here at Siili, it's all the time coming back to the question, what would the end user like? What they wish? What are they afraid of? What are their needs for this service? What are their dreams for this service? What are the features they will use? What are the features they are craving for? And on the other hand, what are the features that are here for nothing and should be removed for the next version, and so forth. But everything boils down to the end user. But that's not everything. It's all about orchestrating things. So the capabilities needed for the digital experience building is, of course, that you have to have capabilities on tying the whole experience to the company's strategy, and from there to the digital strategy of the company. Through this, we make sure that we don't build experiences for the experience's sake, but we build them so that they would have a business impact and they would push forward the company's strategy. And then you need the capabilities of design. So in other words, you need to thoroughly understand the user, and you have to understand the whole customer journey of the user with the company. You have to see the points where the value is created, and on the other hand, you have to see the points where the value is diminished. And working through these points, no matter whether they are analog or digital, you make sure that the value creation is improved and the whole journey is cohesive and recognizable for the user. These are the things that we work on a daily basis. And then taking a look on the capabilities, let's say, behind the screen, you need capabilities of operating with the digital experience platforms. These are regularly known, for example, as CMS systems, but it's not only that. It's not only the computers, the laptops, the tablets, the cell phones. Digital experience is nowadays everywhere. It's in the microwaves, it's in the fridges, it's in the hoovers, for example. One big area for us is, for example, the cockpits of modern cars. The digital screens there, those are also the digital experience platforms. Unfortunately, we couldn't have a talk here today from Siili Auto, but there was an obvious reason for that. That is that they are so swarmed with work and projects that they just couldn't make it. But we promise you guys that next time we have this one, we will also have Siili Auto describing how it is to actually design experiences into a vehicle that is moving 300 kilometers per hour.
And hopefully broadcasting from that vehicle.
Probably so. Then moving onwards, you need capabilities of actually tailor-made software skills of software engineering, and heavily tied to that you have to not only you are creating that very service, but you also have to have the skills to integrate that service to the services created before.
Exactly.
Some of them are made last year, some of them made 30 years ago, but still the skills need to be there. And not only that, then we come to a really important point of data and intelligent use of that data, meaning that you need to be able to collect the data from each of the experiences. Each of the end user experience should create data. That data needs to be warehoused, that data needs to be skillfully analyzed and then fed back to the next experience of that user. So data is really the lifeline of the whole thing. More capabilities coming. As I stated earlier, this is all about orchestration. As most of these experiences are related to giving some sort of a service or aid to the end user, we have to make sure that we are skilled enough to do the dividends of the work between the human being and the machine. Now we are talking about robotic process automation, we are talking about intelligent automation, even hyper automation nowadays. But you need to be capable of doing that as well. And last but not least, for a long time now, the digital experience creation hasn't been a project, it has been a process. Meaning basically that it's a continuous thing, and you need to have the test automation in the place, you have to have the continuous services in place, so we don't update by half a year, but we update by hour. So
exactly.
we could almost say that digital experience is nowadays developing on real time. And this is the whole orchestration of the thing. This is how the digital experiences are made. And now, for our audience, this is the frame picture for us once looking into today's talks. And we hope that you hang on to this one and always reflect what you hear to this very picture. But I guess now it's time to move ahead and introduce the first speech of the day, the keynote. Andreas.
Thank you, Antti. Yeah, really cool picture, and I think something that you all can then take away from today's talk and also then use in your own daily work. But before introducing our first speaker of today, just a quick run through of today's program. So we'll have roughly 20-minute speeches, 5 of them. And after the first one, we're going to have our Hungarian colleague Balázs Fonagi talking about return on investment. After that, we have Tiia Lehtola, Juha-Matti Kosonen speaking about the last mile of digital experience. Then we have Tomi Sjöblom, Jari Nousiainen talking about the benefit of design systems. After that, a panel discussion hosted by Leena Leino, and then we have Caroline Liu, Alexander Alafutsov and Mia Mäkipää talking in that one. And finally Simon Robson connecting brand and DX at the end. But now going into the first discussion first presentation of today, and that's coming all the way from Oulu today. The person is someone with a really long experience in digital experience development. He's been instrumental in helping our collective health and well-being take huge steps forward. He is the Chief Scientific Officer at Oura. Hannu Kinnunen, please go ahead.
I think we have, as we are doing this from all around the Europe, so we are doing everything from Oulu to Hungary and so forth. We are having some problems with the connections, and we need to swap the order a bit. So we are going to Hungary first. So actually, so we'll wait a while for Hannu's speech, and now we start actually with our Hungarian colleague from Supercharge, Balázs Fonagi, and he's going to start with the, as I just told, that everything needs to be connected to the overall strategy of the company. So it would be tied to this return on investment, whatever we do with the digital experience, and we're going to start with that one. And I guess we're going to hear about Hannu a bit later. So let's now move the broadcast to Hungary, and let's hear from Balázs at the beginning. Thank you so much once again for joining us.
Thank you.
Hello to everyone in the studio in Helsinki, and hello to everyone who is watching us. I'm Balázs, and I'm talking to you from Budapest, delivering this presentation from my home. I'm going to talk to you about how to realize return on the investment that you make in creating digital customer experience. And when I say digital customer experience, I mean in the broadest possible sense of the word. It means all the digital products, all the journey elements, all the product features that you are adding to your current ecosystem. I've spent the last decade helping various enterprise clients figuring out their future in this new, let's say, digital reality. And during my work with them, I observed that very often they struggle with one of the following two things. First, clearly defining what business value they expect from an innovation. And second, even if they manage to define it clearly, communicating it to the people who are actually working on the product. Very often, this information gets stuck on the executive level. Now, when I'm entering a new client organization, I'm starting to work on a new project, I'm always very amazed that it can take for me up to weeks to figure out what is their real purpose behind building what they are building. And that's not because I'm slow. It's much more because they actually never really figured out what's their purpose. Now, I thought it would be worthwhile to dedicating this presentation discussing this problem. The main takeaway of this presentation will be good customer experience is not a gesture towards your customers, neither towards your employees. It is a clear value exchange. You try to better solve their needs, and you expect business returns in exchange. Now let's look at what kind of returns I am talking about. You might have heard in the news about Citigroup's misfortune this February. Long story short, their employees misunderstood the user interface, and instead of wiring $8 million, they managed to send $900 million. And now it seems like Citibank won't be able to collect back $500 million from that sum. And that's an astonishingly big number, and it's no surprise that all the news portals and journals were full with articles about the importance of design, and in particular, good user experience design. Now, I do agree that, yes, investing into good customer experience can result in avoiding such expensive, let's say, freak accidents. But let's consider that in 2018, according to their CTO, Citibank invested $8 billion into IT. Now, let's assume that 25% of that is earmarked for innovation, which would make $2 million. And I think that brings us to a very exciting question. How much money can they lose if they don't invest this sum with clear goals in mind? Now, even more importantly, I'm not talking about increasing customer experience to see return on investment in the improvement of metrics, which actually just measure how good the customer experience is. I'm talking here about Net Promoter Score, customer satisfaction points, system usability scale score. Now, don't get me wrong, these are all very important metrics to keep an eye on, but they are not the end goal in themselves. If they grow, they show that we made our customers happier, but they don't tell anything why we wanted to make them happier. As a result of our digital customer experience expenditures, we want to see return in the form of hard business metrics. I would like to illustrate this with the example of Ryanair. You probably know them, they are the largest European low-cost carrier. Ryanair's value proposition is simple. They want to be the cheapest solution to get you from one country to another. They have multiple target segments, but most of them share the same basic need. They want to travel to somewhere and they want to spend on it as little as possible. Now Ryanair reaches this by cutting out basically every element of the customer experience that doesn't serve this need. Those of us who traveled with Ryanair probably know that what is left is not a very good customer experience, but it's a safe experience and it gets you from A to B. The people working at Ryanair know exactly that spending one more Eurocent on the customer experience of the trip itself wouldn't move their business metrics into the good direction. Actually, it would increase their prices and their competition would take many of their customers. Now, on the other hand, Ryanair spends generously on experience of their website and mobile application, and they do this because this moves multiple business metrics into the right direction. They sell more because they build very seamless sales journeys within these applications, and also they save plenty of money on customer care because the customers can easily take care of almost everything through these applications, which are quite well designed. Now, this is what I mean by investing into digital customer experience with very clear goals in mind. Now, to help us think about the business goals that we usually pursue when spending on digital experiences, I came up with a simple matrix. Let's have a look at it. The two axes represent a simple truth. We either do something to save money or to make more money, and the experiences that we build are predominantly directed at customers or employees. These two axes create 4 quadrants. We will go on and have a look at each of them. The most typical setup is when we target customers in order to make more money. Any e-commerce or mobile commerce solution would fall here. Now, moving down, you can also create customer-facing experiences in order to save money. A good example for this would be a self-care application. In a self-care application, people can take care of administration, freeing up customer care resources on our side. So true win-win because we save money and they can take care of their business from the comfort of their home. Moving to the left, on the x-axis, we arrive to the employee-facing quadrant. Every application that optimizes productivity, like a new, more intuitive admin area for our back office colleagues, would save time for these colleagues, and subsequently, it would save time for our business. The last quadrant includes digital experiences for employees that help our business make more money. Now, this one might be a bit more trickier, but we can come up with a good example for it. Let's say an intelligent CRM that recommends personalized offers to our colleagues sitting in the branch offices and supports their sales activity. Now, let's dive a bit deeper into the specific goals we usually expect from each quadrant. As you can see, this map systematically organizes the most important and frequent goals that companies can pursue with digital customer experience innovations. Now, I prepared a detailed walkthrough through the whole map, but then I realized I only have 20 minutes to talk to you and sadly not 20 hours. So instead I will just talk about what kind of metrics are these. Well, the interesting thing about all these metrics is that they are all directly tied to the bottom line. Setting aside non-profits, at the end of the day, most businesses exist to make money. That is why I think that the most important thinking exercise is to keep asking questions until we can answer the ultimate one. Which of these fundamental metrics will our digital innovation target? In which combination and to which extent? Now, you might have realized that I'm only talking about monetary return on investment, and I don't really touch on those softer performance indicators like brand value and customer trust. Now, obviously, it's totally fine to define these as the return on investment that you are hoping for, but I have a slight feeling that these are intermediary metrics. We pursue them to ultimately move things which are laid out on this slide. Generally, we often use more abstract concepts to avoid thinking long and hard about what is really our strategic goal. I have to be honest with you, I'm not really a numbers and finances guy. Then you might ask, why am I standing here talking all about these stern business metrics? Well, because defining our goals in the forms of metrics we want to move creates amazing clarity for everyone who participates in the innovation process. It shows what is the destination of the journey. The reality is that the more innovative and disruptive is the product that you are doing, the more your numbers will be mostly assumptions. So it's not about how precise your numbers are. It's all about discussing the assumptions, laying them out on the table, making clear what our strategic objectives are. The impact comes from deep thinking, communication, and the resulting shared understanding. With this, we arrive to the more fun part of this presentation. From now on, we'll talk about how we can avoid wasting money when we are creating digital experiences. Let's dive into it. As you can see, I will use my own framework to lead you through the 3 layers of digital customer experience. And for each layer, I will share with you, let's say, the most important truths that I've learned about product development regarding it. Now, these are actually the same foundational principles that I'm using in my everyday work and that my design team is also using in their work. We will talk about each layer in time, so right now let's just name them. In the middle, we find the value of the solution. The next one is the product experience, and the last one is the service and ecosystem experience. Now, it's important to note that the more central is a circle, the more essential it is to get it right in order to create any kind of successful innovation. Even though I said 3, you might have noticed that we actually have 4 layers on this diagram. To the very middle of the circles, I added business value. But it doesn't define the experience, it definitely keeps it alive. Imagine it as the sun in the middle of a galaxy. Its gravitation keeps all the planets staying on their course. Well, it's in the middle because no company will keep alive a product if it's not adding to their business. The gravity of the business value is simply necessary to make things work. Okay, by now you must have heard enough my define your goals clearly advice. So now let's dedicate a few seconds to emphasize how important it is to communicate this towards the people who are actually working on the product. Your goal is to make sure that everyone understands what is the commander's intent. Now, ever since I heard about it, I really love the concept of commander's intent. It means that you clearly explain what is the exact goal and purpose behind developing an experience. This intimate understanding of the purpose of why are we even doing this will allow people to make their own good decisions. They will be able to make those good decisions even years after we started the project, and very long projects happen very often in an enterprise environment, and even in an agile setup where the product backlog might be changing weekly. Let's look at a concrete example. You want to introduce a personal finance manager into your mobile bank. After some deep thinking, you figure that the PFM will ultimately serve as a framing solution for your sales messages. It will dress them up as insights and deliver them in the right context for the user. Our ultimate goal is to sell more investments and more loan products. Now comes the second essential part that is sadly very often gets skipped, sharing this with the people who will actually work on the product, turning it into the commander's intent, goal and purpose. If we don't do that, it can very often happen that we return in 12 months and we find a beautifully designed PFM developed into our mobile bank. Customers are raving about it, but actually it's just not delivering any kind of contextual sales messages, and our metrics didn't move into the right direction because it was never really made clear to the team that this is our goal here. Let's move on to the first real experience layer, the solution value. This layer is about one single question. Is your solution actually solving real human needs? For me, this is the most exciting layer. It seems simple, but even the largest companies can fall into the trap of simply wishing for a need to exist. But they wish for it because they see a business opportunity in solving it. Well, wishful thinking doesn't really work. Now, targeting needs which don't exist or needs which are already perfectly served by existing solutions on the market is an excellent way to make sure to realize zero return on investment. In my experience, even your employees will find a way to avoid using experiences which doesn't add anything to their life. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that only make solutions that people ask for. Customer won't tell you what they need. It's your job to figure out by observation and by research what progress in life means for your target customers. As I said, even the mightiest can fall. Think of Facebook Home or Google Glass, two products that flopped because there was simply no need behind them. When we started our discussion with business value, keep in mind that successful innovation is more like solving a formula with 3 variables. And now we will look at all these 3. Until you can't conceptualize a solution that aligns business value, the needs of your customers or employees, and your capabilities to actually execute it, don't start building anything. It's very likely that you will just burn money. This is where design thinking can really help you. Research, prototype, test, learn from it, repeat. Fine-tune your answers until you can solve the formula. Look into the mirror, long and hard, and go through the 3 elements. People, business, capability. If they don't seem to be in harmony, you have more work to do. Now, the penultimate circle is the product experience. This is what we traditionally mean when we think of product design and user experience design. If the first circle asks the question, does it solve the right needs? This one asks, does it solve them well? The principle for this circle comes from lean startup philosophies. First, always create experiences that solve a few needs very well instead of solving many but poorly. Here we see an example from an application that has many features, but none of them is very deep. Even if you have lots of resources, having too many features in an application usually creates a lack of focus. But we will have as an outcome is a broad but shallow experience with journey gaps in it. On the other hand, here we see a deep feature set. This application clearly has only 2 features which solve 1 or 2 needs, either in synergy with each other. Well, the depth means that it solves those few needs very effectively. It has lots of supporting mini features that are supporting these main features, and those make the experience very frictionless and personal. Now, this sounds simple, but in a large organization with many stakeholders and lots of departments, focus can easily get lost and the product can become like a Christmas tree. Now, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but do you know what could solve this problem? A well-defined commander's intent that is clear to everyone who works on the project. If we know what impact we want to reach, it also becomes very clear what we don't need to have in our experience. And as Master Yoda would say, solve customer needs or don't solve. There is no try. Finally, we have arrived to the last circle, the service and ecosystem experience. Actually with it, here is our last principle. Think in holistic journeys. All your digital products, physical services, and even your communication activities are elements of the same customer experience ecosystem. It's important to understand that customers don't care where one product ends and where another service starts. They also don't care anymore where physical world ends and where the digital world starts. Thinking in the whole ecosystem is also important when we think about business value creation. In our last example, let's look at a robo-advisor application. Now, a robo-advisor has a simple premise. Dedicating time of a human expert to customers who don't want to invest large sums usually isn't worth it to a bank. On the other hand, a robot could easily match their needs with a simple portfolio that's a good match for their risk appetite. Now, for the sake of this example, let's assume that there is not that much money to be made on such a business model, but maybe we could use it as an incubator for customers. If we monitor which users are increasing their investments in the app over a certain limit, we could single them out and we could channel those to our more serious wealth management services. For example, we could offer them a video call with an investment advisor. This needs seamless connection between two experiences. It also needs a very holistic thinking about our whole ecosystem. I want to close my presentation with circling back to where we started. Good customer experience is not a gesture towards the customers. We should do it with very clear business goals in mind. I actually believe that the thinking process and the conversations which are required to figure these goals out are almost as impactful as knowing the goals themselves. Thank you very much for your attention, and now I'm handing back the mic to Helsinki.
Thank you, Balázs, and thank you, Hungary. And once again, for all the audience, sorry for the mix-up with the schedules. Now we are back on track, and we just heard that we luckily now have a connection back online with Oulu. So that was a great speech. A lot of takeaways already from that one, but now it's time to introduce our keynote as second.
Yeah, thank you to Balázs also from me. Truly spectacular and fresh ideas. But to the next one, like I mentioned already, it deserves to be repeated. This person has been instrumental throughout his career in furthering the well-being and the health of us collectively. And at the same time, he's been part of building one of the true success stories in Finnish business. It's the Chief Scientific Officer of Oura. Hannu Kinnunen, take it away.
Thank you, Siili Solutions, and thank you for this special opportunity to tell about the experience with the Oura Ring and what we can really derive, what kind of information we can really derive from like physiological sensor data, and how actually this analog, your pulse in your veins and the movement of your arms can actually be used via digital platforms to give a lot of meaningful information about your life and health, and maybe even guide your decisions you make. So my experience is 17 years at Polar, and now 7 years at Oura. And next slide, please. I would like to start by displaying some data, aggregated data from Ring users. So all this data has been derived by wearing a 4-gram ring. And what you can see is average resting heart rate of Oura Ring users across 6 different localities. And you actually see separately the average resting heart night by night from 2 years, 2019 and 2020. And you actually see significant patterns there. And first of all, you might think that what are these ups and downs there? It's not random variation, it's a weekly variation of resting heart rates. That every weekend, global resting heart rates goes up, and during the week it goes down. And then you see an absolute spike upwards at the New Year's Eve in each country that's described here. But now, what happened in spring 2020? It's like a big change that happens, and what take our resting heart rate down. And you would imagine that heart rate coming down means good things. It means that you have recovered better, even your fitness may have increased, and maybe you have cut down of use of alcohol and other things that prevent you from relaxing. So we will return to this, but imagine that all of this has been achieved by 4-gram ring, and how can you end up in this kind of results and reasoning from that data? The next slide, please. And then another topic that I want to emphasize in this talk is that we need to look at our data in the long term. Instead of looking at like our single training session or single poor night's sleep, we need to concentrate on the long term. And this slide illustrates how this is like my colleagues' temperature data, and one temperature data from each night. And we have like 6 months worth of data here. So every bar is one night. And all of the sudden you can see like some kind of whoop, like waves there. And then all of the sudden like a sense that keeps there, like half a degree temperature up. What happens here? It's just simply menstrual cycle taking place and affecting pretty much all of the biosignals in your body, like month after month. And then she started some kind of test in her life, like what do you call it? You take drugs to prevent you from getting pregnant, and they have an effect in your body, and had a clear effect in her body. So long data is strong, and long data comparison to your own norm can tell a lot. So here in this talk we are considering that how the information from your body, how that can be bridged via sensors to the user interface, and how people can learn and get new insights, learn about their body and become aware of what's happening, how their behavior is affecting their body and their body signals, and how with this digital user experience they can become more aware, have like aha moments, that this is me, this is how I'm reacting to different kinds of things. And then they might think that what if I try to live differently next day? And then they can see how their body reacts, and also, as I showed, in the long term. So I'm presenting 5 steps for building awareness on health behavior and their responses. So first, you need unnoticeable sensors to measure your physical and physiological data. Then that data needs to be combined into context, what's happening, and what are these body responses we want to measure. Then we analyze that data and derive your personal normal values and what are abnormal values. And then we feed back what's happening at the right time of the day, that so you are ready to receive the information and you are even ready to make changes in your body. And then all this information can also be harnessed to serve the society and even prevent in preventing healthcare if you'd so like. Next slide, please. So what should we measure? What's important for your health and health behavior? And how can we make the measurement unnoticeable, comfortable? So in health-related behavior, we all know, and we have known for long, like activity recording heart rate monitors that basically tell us to be more active every day. And there are proven health benefits in being physical active that go across your cardiovascular health, weight maintenance, and blood glucose control, even mental health, and daily functioning and daily performance. And it's interesting that how how different areas of science approach the same problem. If you go to nutritional science, you hear the same story, how you need to eat and drink the right things to stay healthy and keep functioning well. But now what has been less understood until lately is the importance of sleep and how all these things are actually intertwined, how they are connected to each other, how actually by sleeping regularly and well, you actually get health benefits that are almost exactly the same as we traditionally know and think with physical activity and diet. And these things are related. Next slide, please. In the first big data analysis that we did with the Oura Ring data, it was like the first generation ring. Some of you remember the big nice ring. And when we look at that 10,000 people that we had that time, those people who had the most consistent wake-up times, so their sleep routine was like regular, they had lower BMI, lower body mass index, they had lower resting heart rate, and they had less inactive time periods during their day. And on the other hand, those people who were living most irregular life in terms of bedtimes and wake-up times, they had higher BMI, higher resting heart rate, and more inactive time periods. So these things are related, and our behavior matters. And one thing you can start with is your sleep routine, if you want to positively affect your health. So one way to do the measurement unnoticeable and get accurate metrics from your body is this 4-gram ring. There's a lot of technology, Finnish design and technology embedded there. It has infrared LEDs, 3D accelerometer and gyroscope, and NTC temperature sensors to provide this biological sensor data and effective algorithms that are power efficient, so that also enable this convenient measurement and convenient use. And the motivation for all of these measurements is that they somehow serve these, provide meaningful and important data about your daily movements and behaviors, your resting heart rate variability, and body temperature variations that can be put together and analyzed at what is the root cause and what is the consequence of things. So the motivation for the measurements is always important, not only embedding of technological sensors in there. The next big thing is that, as I described, it's important to look for your individual norms, always compare to your norms and not to the population averages. The change in behavior can only be achieved by comparing to your own norm, not to others. And for instance, it's not so fruitful to concentrate on single bad night, but rather that you make your lifestyle such that you avoid chronic sleep debt. You prevent from you accumulating problems in your life. And the change in behavior can only be achieved if all the data that we accumulate and display and that we make a relationship between the person and the device. The change in behavior can only happen if the person has increased awareness of who I am, why I react, why I do, what I want to achieve and in my life, what is important to me, and all this can happen also by seeing your data and seeing how you respond to your lifestyle. And one example here is this optimal bedtime. It's a feature in the app, the Ring. It just collects your long-term sleep data and tells you that what's the best time for you to go to bed that gives you the best sleep scores, the best sleep amount and sleep quality combined. And then we analyzed among Oura Ring users who had received this kind of optimal bedtime recommendation, and what is their normal go-to-bed time and what would be the optimal go-to-bed time. And maybe not so surprisingly, we see that the best sleep scores would be achieved by going to bed about 3/4 of an hour earlier than normally. You mean if you go to bed too early, your sleep quality is compromised. But if you go to bed too late, you don't have enough time to sleep. So consistent, already this data that I have shown until now shows that consistent go-to-bed times give like better quality of life overall, and a little bit earlier go-to-bed time gives you optimal combination of sleep amount and sleep quality. And all this information was collected by a like small ring. Then the next final part of my presentation is that how could we then spread this positive message, and how we could help people like in a broader perspective. And this picture here is actually showing all these organs in the body that are negatively affected by sleep deprivation. And we easily think that we heal the stress and we feel the sleep deprivation in our head. And it's something that we need to take like a cup of coffee or something to shake away, a short walk to shake away the bad feeling of stress, or take a meditation, and all of a sudden everything is all right. But if these things become chronic, it's important that they are experienced in the whole body. So that's why, by the way, we can also measure the responses from peripheral signals and analyze our sleep and stress and all these kind of things. So if we can reduce our stress levels and pay attention to sleep, we can actually do a lot of good in our work to reduce chronic diseases. And as I show the skin temperature relationships to like a menstrual cycle phase, there are applications in pregnancy-related matters and women health overall, and work-life balance. And like one of the simple things that what has happened that the gossip says out there is that like the Oura Ring mainly has reduced the alcohol intake among Finnish engineers. So it's a good thing. And we have paid attention to our circadian rhythms. So we did analyze global resting heart rates over the time period of 2.5 years. And we see that every New Year's Eve has a big spike. And actually the most stressful time in terms of resting heart rate, elevated resting heart rate, is actually between Christmas and New Year's Eve. And then we have this kind of seasonal variation that's the opposite direction in the southern hemisphere of the world, in the lower panel. And then we have this weekly rhythm that is contrary to what we would like to. We would like to have weekends as a relaxing periods when we like get ready for the next week, and sometimes it's not the case. And then we saw how the pandemic and the lockdown severity actually affected our resting heart rates, though that surprisingly in countries like in Singapore, where the lockdown stringency was like big, where actually the people went to bed a little bit later, but they slept more, and their resting heart rates went lower. And then there are a lot of future applications that, now that we understand that the devices like the ring are measuring your pulse, PPG signal, every single pulse over the course of the night. And there's a lot of information there in addition to heart rate and heart rate variability that are important numbers, but there are also other information that can be mined from that data. For instance, I named a few that are like talked about in the among wearable devices right now. It's like blood pressure changes, arrhythmia, apnea, SpO2 measurements. All that information is there, and we kind of let that gold mine flow through our fingers right now. And then we already have some findings how menstrual cycle, and I related some of the individual people's data, how menstrual cycle affects the measurements of skin temperature and actually also heart rate variability and breathing rate. We have some science done on the topic. So it's time to conclude. We have various sensors that can measure a lot of things from ourselves. A lot of those numbers can be made much more meaningful if we take long-term data, a lot of samples regularly or irregularly over the same person, and we do the comparison into your own values to determine if your life is stressful, if you are recovering well, and if you are doing the right things that support your health and well-being. But there is this bridge that technical people can fill in how this information flies from the human body to the sensors and from the sensor to the user interface. And then we need to take the next step, how that information from the device is bridged to our understanding of human life and our behavior, and how we, if we are ready to make changes and find the good things that are available for us in our lives. So the course goes such that we as developers, we build better systems and devices, more accurate, more convenient, more human-like, that speak human. Then we as humans, we can reduce our stress levels. Let's do the right things at the right time, like sleep at night, be physically active at day, have regular meal times, be private our workouts and have relaxing moments and have time for social life and such things. When we do these right decisions, our physiology will respond, and we will see that with the same device and same equipment as we have now seen. We can observe the good things. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannu and Oulu, for the great presentation. I don't know what's your key takeaway on that one. We're going to come to those at the end once we draw the conclusions on the talks, but at least I can already now say that my hand is missing something, and I'm going to get me one of those rings. That was awesome. Great job. What do we have next?
Next, we have a really interesting talk about the last mile of digital experience. And I'm not going to spoil what it means, but rather let Tiia Lehtola and Juha-Matti Kosonen take you through it. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good morning also from our part. I'm Juha-Matti, here's Tiia.
Hi.
Our topic is called Designing the Last Mile of Winning Customer Experience. We're gonna tackle the topic a little bit from the design perspective, but mainly from the leadership and managerial point of view. So the topic could also be how to enable the design of winning customer experience. But anyhow, let's get started. So, customer experience seems to be on most companies' agenda. Hence, the business value of having a great customer experience seems to be evident based on quite a wide research. And let's look at few numbers.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, exactly. So according to PwC, actually 1 in 3 customers are willing to abandon a brand that they love just for one bad experience. And if we look at the numbers, companies that are focusing on customer experience and operating with customer experience mindset are reported to drive between 4 to 8% higher revenues. And 84% of companies that have increased or improved in customer experience have reported an increase on revenues because of that. And if we look at the bottom line, 60% more profitability have been reported from companies that are focusing on customer experience than those who don't. So it's no wonder that customer experience is a strategic goal for so many companies.
Yeah, quite promising numbers or dramatic numbers. So if everyone's competing on with customer experience and trying to differentiate with customer experience, the opportunity to kind of win with that, the margin is getting tinier and tinier. And in many industries, the products and services as a baseline, they are pretty much alike. So each company whose product or service as a baseline is good enough actually has an opportunity to win with the customer experience and differentiate if that challenge is taken seriously. So in this talk we aim to offer 3 themes or thinking points what to consider when working on your customer experience. Okay, so let's go into the point 1, which is that when margins for differentiation are small, the design of customer experience needs to tackle even smaller details of customer expectations, behavior, and emotions. So let's look at this in a bit more detail. As the margins are smaller, the emotional experience is becoming increasingly important differentiating factor, so just tackling those functional needs is not enough. And to be able to tackle those needs and the emotional experiences, a good starting point is to start figuring out what's the role of what is or could be the role of your product or service in a customer's life. So looking into these scenarios and situations where you're present and what kind of role you have or could have there. So start exploring the jobs that a customer hires your product for and try to figure out what are those meaningful moments where you need to shine. And when you get the grasp of these things, then you can start planning your customer journeys and your experiences. And when you're looking at the journey, it's important to start by looking at the situation and the journey is really from the true customer's eyes, and not from this expected journey that you think internally that the situation could be. And also, it's important to look into kind of the extended ecosystem, what kind of other actors, what kind of other products and services are related to the use of your product. And that will give you opportunity to figure out your positioning and your potential partnerships, for example. And when designing the experiences, it's important to tackle these meaningful moments and dare to stay out of the way for the rest of the time. Because if you're driving too much engagement on the kind of the situations where you're not really creating value, that actually turns into counterproductive and just might burden your clients and drive them to your competitors. And then as a next bit, when designing the journey or looking into the customer experience, it's good to look at the whole life cycle of the customer relationship. It's actually it's a bit unfortunate that still some companies still tend to do these kind of point solutions, putting their experience efforts to like these kind of single point interactions. For example, trying to maximize what happens in the sales phase and then missing out on rest of the customer relationship and miss out a lot of commercial opportunities and opportunities for retention, for example. Then the next bit, do your benchmark, but don't copy blindly, because as we're talking about this margin, so it's those little details that will differentiate you. So those are, in the end, they are different from product to product. But it's of course good to see like what's the minimum base level of experience to provide from competition, but kind of that's it in a way. For example, Amazon actually they, as one of their principles, they're saying that their people should be customer obsessed, but they shouldn't be competitor focused. So they're focusing on their customer and the stuff that they do. So there to show your own strength, your own persona in your experiences. And then do the discovery proactively, because customers won't do it for you. Yeah, some customers, of course, will give you some feedback that this is not working, but in a wider sense, they probably just gonna walk out and go to your to the next best
Exactly.
thing. So to get a grasp of what we just discussed there, it's important to do the proper research and insight creation, because it's those details that will make or break your success with the customer experience, and especially with the last mile. Let's take a personal example from Tia next.
Thank you.
Here you go.
Yeah. So I've been a customer of Zalando for quite some time now. So that's basically what I'm expecting, or what I'm accustomed to as a customer when I'm doing online clothing purchasing. But recently I needed to get clothing for my kid, and I wanted to go for this local major retailing brand. And due to Corona, I wanted to do this online. And online shopping experience was good, and in the end I got my package, and the clothing again was really good quality and fitting for my kid, but the overall delivery and overall process, what happened, weren't quite there what I was expecting as a customer. It took close to pretty much triple the time that it takes from Zalando to deliver a package, and there was this kind of bits and pieces of the communication missing that I was expecting as a customer. I didn't know the estimated delivery time of my parcel, and when it started taking longer than I'm accustomed to, I as a customer kind of had to go to them and start digging for the information just to find out that my parcel even hasn't been shipped. So the point here is that even though your core might be doing great, your clothing is super good, it's those bits and pieces that put together the total experience for the customer. And in this case, I guess we can say that, well, it didn't work for their competitive advantage. So coming to our second point here, to provide winning customer experience, all employees and solutions putting together that winning customer experience need to understand what the customers are about. And what we mean by that is that providing customer experience and putting together a winning customer experience is definitely not just one person or department's job. It's some of those interactions that happen with the customers. So everybody involved needs to understand the details of customers' needs and wants, behavior and emotion to be able to provide that winning customer experience. And as your customer experience is pretty much as good as your last interaction with the clients, it's really important that all those involved work together, and they also share an understanding of what the winning customer experience looks like in your context. And to do that, customer experience needs to be a strategic cause for your company. And here's where management leadership come in to act as an enabler and making sure that the reasons why your company does things and how you measure, for example, success, the customers there in the beginning. And although I just said that it's not a job for just one person or the department, it is great to see that there is nowadays roles for ownership for customer experience in so many companies. Because these roles are really important that we make sure that there is this cross-company collaboration. And because, well, winning customer experience, it doesn't happen in silos. And last but not least, to our second point, to provide this wholesome experience, we need to employ the customer data from each touch point. You're not able to serve your customer in the best possible way if you don't know what else happened with the customer during the other process. So use the data and learn to provide a wholesome winning customer experience. To sum up, providing winning customer experience is near impossible without shared understanding across the company.
Yep. Exactly.
Exactly. So coming to our last third point, in order to win with that margin, customer experience needs ongoing focus, it needs investments, and it needs to be a core value of your company. What we mean by this is that where customer experience is not a task or responsibility for one person or a team, what it also is not, it's not a one-time project, something that you can tick have done today and then just forget about it. It needs to be continuous daily work and practices. And here again, leadership is a key enabler for great customer experience. We need to make sure that there's enough room and resources to do those practices that enable great customer experience, like customer research, insight creation, and sharing of those insights across the company. And the customer experience, it should be there. It should be at the beginning. It should be why you do things. If it is not, it will always come as an afterthought, something that's kind of glued over of something that you already did, where it should be there in the beginning of why you do things. And last but not least, when we keep being humble, open-minded, and obsessed with our customer experience can be a great source for innovation and new business opportunities. And hey, if you don't want to take it from us, there's a couple companies who have made it pretty well being customer obsessed. So maybe you should consider it too.
Yeah. All right. So we promised 3 key points, but there were quite many sub-points in these 3 points. So sum up our presentation, we'd like to highlight these few items still. So, as said, winning customer experience doesn't happen by chance. So make sure that it's a shared strategic goal, and there's enough room for this customer experience or customer-centric practices. So sharing insights, doing cross-function collaboration, and doing the actual research and insight creation. And as a second bit, do your research and know your customer, and as a key thing in this second point is that the knowledge about the customer needs to be spread out through all the functions and people who even remotely work with or towards the customers and creating the customer experience. And as the last point, start building today. So customer experience can either be your opportunity or it can be your disadvantage, depending how you look at it.
Yeah.
So start building your customer experience practices, culture, and it's well, as a direct self-advertisement. You can always accelerate that build, that change by using external experts to help you with that.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to look close and find where you should make efforts. So gladly you don't have to do it on your own.
Yeah. So that sums up our presentation. So thank you very much for listening and have a nice rest of the seminar.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Tia and Juhis. Really insightful presentation again, and surely some new key takeaways for everyone listening. Now on to the next one, and Antti will reveal who is on stage and talking about what.
Yeah, as we earlier said, that no longer these are projects, but processes. What we need to make sure is that processes stay effective and efficient. And therefore, next we're going to hear Jari Nousiainen and Tomi Sjöblom telling us about what is a design system, what are its benefits, and how to get one. So, guys, go ahead.
Hello, we're here to talk about why do you want design systems, and hopefully we can also advise you on how to actually get one. My name is Jari Nousiainen. I've been doing things on the web for a quarter of a century already, and currently I focus on how we build solutions, not just what we build, but how do we actually do it. And with me here is Tomi Sjöblom.
Yeah, and I don't have quite as vast experience. I have just 15 years on the front end and about 5 years in design. So one foot in one foot in another. And nowadays I'm helping teams to collaborate on the user experience level, because the user experience is really what you bring to the production, not what you design. And let me start with the story of a button, because I'm a front-end engineer and I've probably done this tens of times. So I get a request that could we get a button on our shiny service. And then I go to say that, okay, for this one button, we will need a couple of states just to have a button and just to be able to hover it with the mouse, to have an effect on that, just to be able to use it with your remote control on the focus state, just to have the button press state, and just to have it unpressable by a disabled state. So we have 5 buttons, not too bad. But then comes this request that, okay, we probably have to have buttons for different kind of interactions. We can't really use the same button for everything. If there is OK and cancel, we probably need to have this kind of primary, secondary relationship. And we also might need to have this kind of ghost button for when nature of this task is appropriate. So there's 15 buttons. Still not too bad, but a bit more than I anticipate. Okay, then there comes a request that, well, what about, should we add icon to those buttons to be able to further distinct those features and kind of bring some visuality in them? Yeah, still doable, but now we have 30 buttons. Then, of course, there comes a time when these buttons are kind of big and clunky, so we decide to make small versions of those buttons, and suddenly we have 60 buttons. And of course, because we are on the bleeding edge, we want to introduce this new dark mode in our application, and suddenly we are staring at 120 different states of a button. So what happened essentially with these couple of small-ish feature requests, we just scaled from 1 button to 120 buttons. And to give you a conservative estimate, to be able to use 1 hour per button for designing that state, for developing it and for testing it, we are essentially staring at 3 weeks of work on the buttons. So what we learned here is that buttons are expensive, but what is even more expensive is doing this same thing repeatedly over and over again across each one of your services or digital products. So what we see as like traditional workflow in some of our projects, and well, we have this kind of double diamond model when we talk about design, that we have to discover what's the real right problem to solve, define the problem. We are not focusing on that too much on this talk. So we are more going to how we develop the solution and how we deliver the solution and how we do it over and over again during the product lifecycle. In the design phase, there is like feedback loops. For example, the designer can prototype something with business, get the feedback from there, make it a bit more nice and shiny, then test the same thing with user, add some things, also get the feedback, and then for the development phase, you also get the feedback that what this design needs to be complete. And this is all still visible for the business. But what happens when this design is kind of approved and moves to a development? We have this discussion that we made it in the tasks, and then we have to make a decision who starts working with it first. So is it the UI or is it the data and logic on the background? And while each of these approaches have had their pros and cons, while the backend driven approach, so we do the logic first and then we put some nice UI on top of that, it kind of, we lose the track of progress in a sense, because the design is being made invisible and then it resurfaces only when the front end is ready. Meanwhile, if we go front end first, there is a tendency that we end up doing something with mock data or something that's not real. So basically, we do something completely separately that we have to still connect to the system. And well, each of these have their like own difficulty on the feedback loop. Of course, when we discover the problem, it's usually the users that point it out, and the users are also the last ones to see the solution. But of course, it seems that the business is like the next in this line. So the business sees the designs, that the designs are ready, but it's only involved when it comes to testing the feature, doing the customer acceptance testing. Of course, designers and developers are more looped in this day-to-day work because they can see every line of code or the testing environments that we are doing it. But it might be that on the business side, there is this kind of, where is my money going? Is it flying away? What's happening? When is the feature coming out? So what are we trying to do here is to make this process a bit more transparent. Let's talk a bit about Storybook. It's a relatively new tool, and it has resurfaced because of this difficulty of creating components in this kind of front-end sandboxes. And it provides you a way of wrapping a library into your project that can produce a separate website from your service, which just documents the UI components that are being used in the service. So it's not tied to a business logic, it's just a representational layer for the UI, which can be completely done with code. What it also does is that it kind of forces developers to make some things visible, such as how do we name those components, what do we call them, what kind of data do they need. So these kind of things, and also the structure of how are we creating these components is pretty nicely reflected through the Storybook UI. And for this, it matches pretty much one-to-one on the design toolboxes that we're using.
All right, so let's think about the systems that we would use for the whole process. So a design system can mean a lot of things. It can consist of a lot of different parts. So there can be something that we can call Design System Hub, which is basically a documentation website that everyone involved with the whole system can access, and it's kind of the documentation for the whole thing and catalog of assets. Then we have the design kit, which is basically the design tools, visual high-level prototyping tools and such that the designers use. Then we have a component library that developers, testers have access to. and that includes the reusable reference implementation. So what does the design system do? It serves products. Although we say here that you can have multiple products, it's kind of the obvious benefit of a design system that you can serve multiple products with the one system. Still, the targets can be also within one system only, so that you can use the same system for building new features for the design system. So you don't really need a fleet of products, fleet of websites or something like that to benefit from the design system. And the value from a design system that it promises to give is quite clear. So we get efficiency, we can create better user interfaces in less time. Feature lead time will be shorter because we already have elements that we can reuse. It's easier to maintain and update the interface because it's easier to test as everything is clearly documented. Onboarding is also easier because of the documentation, as there is a clear process documented for everybody from product owner to developer and everyone in between. Then, of course, due to these points mentioned before, it's also easier to scale, both into kind of horizontally into more features or into larger holes. You can do bigger sites, more sites, and all that. And you can also scale team-wise, so one team can work on different systems, or multiple teams can actually work on the same system. About the efficiency, it's important to remember that it will cost you something to get on with the design system. There is this kind of, I would call, investment period, where you have to build the system, and only after that is completed, you start to get the benefits. But the benefits will very likely be large, and it's always dependent on the product and the project. How long does the investment period last? For example, I did a quick 2.5-month project just a while ago, and I would say the investment period that was about 3 weeks. So it's kind of fair balance. Then, how to get kind of a reasonable structure within the design system? You need some kind of model, and we have used usually this idea of atomic design that was coined by Brad Frost, a designer, about 8 years ago. So there you have the design tokens such as colors and fonts and sizes and that kind of things that you implement in the most fundamental elements of your system, called atoms. And of those, for example, a button is an atom. And of those atoms, you then build molecules, such as a card. A card can have atoms such as heading, picture, lead text, and a button. Then you combine those cards into an organism, which can contain multiple cards, and it can also contain like filters or something else. But the point is that the button in all of these layers is always the same button, no matter where it is. And for designers then, this tool chain and the process gives the possibility of interacting with the developers better, because we have catalog of the solutions, catalog of what we can use to build. It's easier to experiment, it's easier to explore, and then there is clear expectancy what the delivery will actually be. The communication is better as we have a single thing that we can talk about. And in contrast to the kind of traditional model that Tommy was speaking of in the beginning, we get this iterative spiraling process that allows us to spiral down towards the product as we vision it by including everybody in the process in the feedback loop. And the feedback loop doesn't go just once, but it can go on all the time. And we refine and refine, and the product gets better all the time. And it's important that every domain of expertise is included in producing the feedback. And it all happens within the limits of the design system. So then from a high-level perspective, you can think that the brand ownership steers the design process, and guides how to apply the brand, your brand onto the design system. Then that is implemented in the front end, in the story, in the sandbox, and in the design kit. And the requirements on what to actually implement come from the actual project. So both sides will meet, both like on the horizontal level and on the vertical level. So then a few points about how the workflow actually goes. So we have been working with Tomi recently with fairly traditional content management systems. And a key issue there is that the business visibility can be, I would say, lacking. So that
it disappears for a while.
Yes, it disappears a while. So the flow goes from the left to the right. And at first we design something, we show that the business, it gets approved, and then we start figuring out how that is translated into the actual items. So we map the data, we develop backend components in the CMS, and then we start doing the UI components. So in this case, we pick the path where we do the backend first, and then we do the front end after that. And then we get the UI components that we can show to business and to users. But the lack of visibility is disturbing. And we might have had the front end sandbox, but it was forgotten in the corner. So with the design system, we implement the user interface independently. It's not tied strictly to the business logic. It's not tied to backend development doing things in a certain way. We developed the user interface so that it kind of it declares a contract that the backend will have to fit it, and the data is modeled after the functional requirements and the design. So we know that we need this kind of piece of text here, and we need this kind of heading here, and all that, and the links will go there, and we define how the components will function. And then backend will implement that. It will match the design and the UI component as it's been implemented. So this brings the benefit that as we start from the front end, and it will not then start fluctuating with the backend development, but we can actually commit to having the front end as we have it, and then the whole development process becomes visible to business, and we can get feedback at all stages, which is a huge benefit. So the whole flow looks like this. So we actually get the design. We do the things in, for example, Storybook, which is the front-end sandbox. We get the UI components, and we can maintain them in this loop. And then we continue with the front-end development into the data mapping and back-end components. And it's all visible through the UI components during the whole process. So this brings back the control of the business and hopefully takes away the worry of where your money is going to. So to summarize, with the design system, we can do things once and use the same things everywhere. We have a set of tools, and we build pieces separately from business logic, so they are interchangeable. We can use the same things everywhere due to that. And then the documentation and naming practices are consistent and aid in all phases of the process. The interface development progress is more visible. Everybody can see what's going on. And most important to remember is that you will benefit from a design system even if you don't have multiple products and a huge ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you, Jari. Thank you, Tomi. We'll take the stage now. And
Thank
we'll
you.
let you to breathe.
Okay, thank you.
So much. Really good speech. So, Andreas, who do we have next?
Next, we're going to change the format slightly. We're going to have a fireside chat, well, without the fire. But we're going to have Leena facilitating, and the topic's going to be data. You already heard earlier today Hannu speaking about health data in connection with digital experiences. And now Lena's going to be joined by Caroline, Alexander, and Mia, and they're going to talk about broadly about data in DX development and design. Take it away.
Welcome everybody and welcome to our panelists to this discussion about intelligent use of data. Maybe we can start with an easy question. What is intelligent use of data? What do you think, Mia?
Well, I think I would give this two definitions. The first one being data intelligence as a practice in which we gather data and we analyze it, and then we prepare it, we report it, and then we take the results and as information that we use as insight to improve our products and our services and have a positive business impact. But I think the other way to think about it is sort of us as digital experts, as DX experts being the people who use data intelligently. So when we have data, how do we communicate it to the right people? How do we make sure that people understand it and the right people get it at the right time so that they are able to make good decisions based on that data and really make these actionable, have actionable insights that they can use to really create good impacts?
Yeah, and I think I can expand a little bit on the data intelligence aspect that Mia mentioned. I think for a data scientist, the point of having intelligent use of data is to enable flexible and adaptive behavior. And of course, what that means will depend on the project in question and the product in question. But in general, I think there are maybe 3 levels of intelligent use of data currently. So the first level being something like the standard offline data analysis. This is things like customer segmentation or static user testing or something like this, where perhaps quite complex data analysis procedures are used, but at the end of the day, it's a human who's making the decision. On a second level, you have products where a live online process is enhancing the product in some way. So this is something like content moderation, automatic content moderation, or a recommendation system where the system observes the behavior of the users and then recommends products or content based on the previous behavior. And here the difference is basically that the decisions are being made by the computing process itself. And then finally, we have a third level where, and a perfect example would be a company like Oura, where you can't really separate out the data analysis from the product in any meaningful way. The data analysis is, to a large extent, the product. Something like a self-driving car would be a perfect other example, where you cannot have a self-driving car without computer vision and the processes that accompany it.
I think you guys already given pretty comprehensive answers. So if I may add, my perspective would be more seeing the question is intelligent use of data, and then how do we define intelligent? One is we already have, that is more from the biological point of view, a human intelligent, and then the human intelligent, we're making decisions. We're really good at storytelling. We're good at making decisions based on our intuition and logical reasonings. Then in terms of artificial intelligence, that is also very intelligent, but intelligent in a different way. It's really good at processing big amount of data or perform in a very specific tasks. So I see a very good combination of both intelligent in use. And actually, I think that is already very well embedded in our day-to-day life. Like you have given off self-driving car to fully realizing that. Before that, now in the modern cars, we have lots of good sensors and good artificial intelligence embedded in to prevent the traffic accidents.
Super interesting points. You talked about a lot about decision making, and I would like to know next, how is data-driven decision making carried out in digital experience development projects or that sort of context. Caroline, what kind of experiences do you have?
Yeah, sure. In practice, every project is different, naturally. I think my suggestion would be, before we start a project, try to have an initial assessment. What is the data maturity of the client? And then how ready the problem is already defined before we come into the development side. And as well, to have a understanding that if the client is ready to start using the data-driven, make their decision. And different scenario will have different strategies. But if we look at a general process, starting point is always to discovering, understanding the whole context of the problem, the people involved in it, software involved in it, and data that we are tracking in that process. And to define the understanding, then we're utilizing the qualitative data or quantitative data, and then combine our understanding. Once the understanding is laid off, then we start popping up different ideas. That's when the ideation phase happens. And when we have idea, we make it a quick prototype, rather through the design tools or a proof of concept that we coded ready. Then we conduct to the user test. Then from that, we also learn from the user data to know which idea we want to carry it on moving forward for development. Before we start development, at least in my project, I'll always focus on defining that clear hypothesis. That hypothesis should link to the business KPI or the goal that we want to achieve for the project. Then define through brainstorming with a business owner or project owner, define a measurable metrics as something we can really track back whether we succeed or not. So then once we have that defined, we start development and then we deploy the result. And then it depends on the different project, we will give different duration to measure that metrics. And once that we find we didn't realize or we misunderstood, then we learn from there and we continue next round of the development phase.
Yeah, wow, what an answer. Yeah, I think you said, you explained it like really, really well. The only thing that I would maybe add to that or emphasize from my perspective is the importance of the data gathering and prepping in the beginning of a process or a project, where you really have to take in as much data as possible sort of objectively and maintain that it's really like reliable and that it's understandable to everyone. So that way we can make sure that we don't have any biases in the way that we interpret the data. So the data comes to us sort of objective, it's an objective intake, and then we get information on it, and then we gather the insights. But the insights already have a little bit of interpretation in them. So the data that we gather needs to be objective, and it also needs to be really accessible. And I think this is something that is always really important to remember, that we maintain the accessibility of the data to everyone involved in the project, not just in the beginning, but throughout the project. And it's easy and sort of like simple to go back to the original benchmark data to make sure that you are heading to the right direction. So you don't have to remember like, oh, in the beginning we had this and those information bits. Now I wonder what to do with them. But instead, it's really easy to go back. And even at the end of the project, as Caroline mentioned, you have this iterative process. So you have to maintain the sort of integrity of the objective data so that you have the intact data that you compare to when you move on in the process.
Yeah, I think I can sort of agree with both Mia and Caroline on the previous points. Maybe what I want to emphasize is two facts. One is the fact that you really need to be quite goal-oriented and purpose-driven. You need to understand why a project is being sort of undertaken. So nobody wants to be in a project and have the sort of final meeting 1 month or 3 months after the start, and then somebody asks what the value of all of this was. You want to know the value when you start, and you want it to be sort of certain throughout the project. For the second point, I think as a data scientist, data-driven decision-making brings to mind the fact that you're basing your decisions on data means that any bias you have in the data will also manifest in the decisions that you make. and this is not a case against data-driven decision making. You will have biases in any case. It's mainly a case for being very sort of observant of the biases in your data and sort of the interpretations that you take out of the data that will be affected by that.
Definitely. Maybe we can talk about the data itself next, and I would like to ask you, how should we then gather the data and how we could intelligently use it produced by AI? And maybe Alexander, maybe you would like to go first with this one.
Yeah,
what do you
I
think?
sort of started already, so maybe I can continue. I think for the gathering part, you have to be aware of the biases, but I think one of the challenges that I, as a data scientist, face in many projects is the fact that when I come into the project, the data is often already gathered. And it may be gathered before the sort of questions of interest are defined in the project. And this is unfortunate because often the way the data has been gathered and what data has been gathered will limit what sort of questions we can answer using the data. So what I would like to see is have involving data scientists and data analysts and designers in a project as soon as possible, from the start, if possible, so that they can all bring their expertise to the question and you can sort of have a very effective way of collecting data and sort of answering questions later on. As for how to use the data or how to use the results that an AI produces, I think what also needs to be understood is that the choices made during modeling the data will affect how the results of the model can be used. So there are plenty of examples of this, both serious and less serious, but one sort of fairly publicly visible example was from Google in 2015 when they introduced a feature in Google Photos which automatically tagged and labeled user sent photos. So a user would send a photo and then the system would provide a list of labels of the content in the photo. And I'm sure during initial testing this was fine, but once the product was in the hands of the users, a problem soon emerged. So what was noticed was that dark-skinned individuals tended to be labeled as gorillas by the system, which is of course a PR nightmare and sort of very unfortunate in any case. And the reason for this is not because there's necessarily a racial bias in the data, or at least not an explicit racial bias. It's probably because there's a mismatch between the training data and the data that the users were generating. So things like this are what we sort of need to really emphasize and focus on.
Yes, very harrowing example. I have a very similar thought in sort of the gathering phase. I think we have both, and many people have come from the data point of view, come to a project and be like, oh man, I wish I was here when we started the data gathering, because it's not something that you can never go back. You can always gather more data, but once you have a data set, you are limited to that in terms of what kind of results you can drive from that. So if you wanna, and you are limited to specific questions, and if you wanna ask the different questions, then you have to think about like going all the way to beginning and be like, okay, can we answer these questions with this data set, or do we need another strategy to gather new kind of data? And for example, I have a lot of customers who are often very surprised even when I tell them that I am able to quite intricately find out what kind of terms do people use when they Google in order to arrive to their website. And so, for example, if you have a customer that sells dental hygiene products for the elderly, their most popular keyword that they are going into the site, that people are going to the site, is banana gum. So we need this kind of information in order to know what the reality of the website and what the reality of the digital process really looks like to an average customer. But we don't know this data unless we look for it. So we need to know, and I think we can all kind of dare to be a little bit more curious and bold in the questions that we ask, because maybe we can't find, maybe we are limited in the data that we can use and gather, but let's ask the questions and let's try to find out if and what ways we could go towards gathering the data and then finding out the answers from there.
Yeah, I guess I can continue add a bit. I think both of you already articulate the fact that importance of the quality for the data set that we use for processing the data. The data processing itself is to train the AI from there and evaluate. Then the base of that is the data quality. I guess from my personal experience, I can tell one of the project I was in a couple of years ago, it was a business concept was to understanding the digital behaviors from different countries, and we had different panels in different countries. In some country, we had a really big panel, more than 10,000 users in there. And one of the challenge we find out as a designer working in that project, that the panelist in the panel doesn't really represent with the demographics. And in order to represent the digital behavior, then we need to really have that representatives of what is a population. Then I think we see the challenge in the data quality, but how to solve it, it's more of a business problem. The challenge was that we couldn't really get in those people who are tech savvy or who have a good data or privacy awareness. They don't want to join this kind of panel, give out my digital data and get a small amount of monetary rewards in the end of the month. That was not a business model to track them. So what we did as a solution at that time is to do a rebranding for the whole panel. So as an outcome of the rebranding, we have defined the 3 pillars. This was happened around 4 or 5 years ago. And at that time, we defined the first value pillar is to give a full transparency, how the data is used. Second one is responsibility, and third one is the trustworthiness. And in practice, it means if you join the panel and when you are the owner of your data, one day when you leave in the panel, then all the trace of your data is also deleted from the panel, and your data is absolutely used anonymously. So I think at that time was a good step forward, and not just to solve the problem from a technology point of view, as well to understand the context, why this challenge happened, how might we solve it. That's my side from the gathering the data. In terms of how to use the data that's produced by AI, I would say that I see the result given by AI, it's more as a suggestion, because the AI itself, the decision giving, it's based on the historical data that we feed into the AI, and then it's a mathematical process how to generate that decision, where it doesn't really understand what is the AI doing. It doesn't really understand what are the consequences the AI can bring. Where human understand what is the technical side of that, what is social impact can bring. So in terms of getting the AI, let's take it as a suggestion, not too literally. From design point of view, I would also like to highlight the fact we can also think about when we're designing an AI, how do we give that a tone of voice to represent AI information more as a suggestion than the final confirmation.
Thanks for sharing these examples and experience. Super interesting. Maybe if we look into the future next, what do you think? How is the future of using data intelligently going to be like?
Well, I think I can start with this. I think there's a lot of advice that we've already sort of mentioned that should be taken to heart about having representative data and avoiding bias and really understanding what the project is going for and what the data can tell us. In practical terms, I think it will depend a lot on the company. So there's a lot of variation between companies in terms of what the AI or machine learning maturity of the company is. So there are a lot of companies that don't have a lot of experience, and for those companies, the sort of recipe would be to take baby steps and sort of promote proof of concept projects and then sort of bit by bit promote those into active use and thereby collect experience and sort of collect or sort of gain confidence in providing AI solutions. On the other sort of end of the spectrum are companies like Aura, who already have a lot of hard-won experience and expertise in AI and machine learning. And of course, there it's really difficult to say what they should do next. I'm not going to speculate right now for Aura specifically, but what I think is that there are a lot of techniques in AI and machine learning that aren't seeing much use right now. So there are things like computational creativity, which means having a computer generate some sort of new creative content, whether that be new text or new images or sound or whatever. And this is something that's perhaps been in the media recently, but it's not in sort of regular industrial use yet. And I think that's something that I would like to see increase in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we think about the future in, let's say, 5 years, the biggest change that we are seeing is that the things we have now will just become more accessible and more popular for people to actually use. So, and then there are these few sort of like really forward-thinking and really mature, digitally mature companies that are sort of living in the future, whereas the general population is living in the current. So I think that's, and I hope as well that that's the biggest thing, is that all these ideas that we make and this machine data that we can use, that it becomes more accessible and we can use it more sort of like, yeah, we can use it to solve more real life problems and for different types of people's issues. And I think I'm also seeing this sort of twofold future, where one part is these machines learning to communicate with each other better and producing these small sort of ecosystems of their own making, where you have these predictive algorithms and they feed information somewhere, and then the machine makes a product or makes a solution, and then they kind of carry on. But even there, we need to be really vigilant, as you mentioned, keeping in mind these ethical solutions. And I think it was really well put when you said that the algorithms, we should take them as recommendations, not as a given. So we need to remain there to kind of like oversee those. But then the other side is sort of us, like the future of our role would be even more in taking the data and harvesting it for the use of our customers and for the use of our the people using the products, and make sure that everyone really understands that we are able to communicate the value of the insights and transform them into actions, or transform them into suggestions for the customers to make actions, so that they can really use the data that is being generated more and more. So sort of our future as this bridging the gap between the data and then the actions that the customers can take.
I guess my add-on would be seeing how the future would be for the DX development. Then we carry on with the good practices we have. Like early on, both Mia and Alexander already mentioned that we want to encourage more multidisciplinary contribution for the project at the starting phase already, not joining it when we already have everything set. You just do that small, narrow part of the work. That's not the future we envision for. On the other hand, I think we definitely can be benefit from the AI. AI can give that unique values that our human now don't have. For example, AI is really good. AI still can be creative, like Alexander, you have given an example. In other fields like architecture and industrial design, they are also experimenting different ways to create solutions. It's called a generative design. So they are utilizing the computing algorithms and then generate all sets of solutions based on the parameter that was fed in through designer, business people, or data scientist or engineer, and then fine-tune the solutions. And then they plan more on evaluating which solution works. So I think that's one way we go. And still, if you look at the process I early on laid out, from discovering to ideation, make a prototype, and testing, in that process, even how we develop, there are still lots of manual work. I think AI can help us to optimize those manual works. One of the examples I discovered when preparing this topic, that there is an application. You can take a picture of the drawing you made through pen and paper, and by taking the picture, a fancy UI is already automatically generated and can be seen from Figma. I think imagine the time we save from that simple picture taking.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. Caroline, you talked about more DX context already. If we think about a bit your personal point of view, how do you see your role now and in the future concerning AI and digital experience development?
Yeah, I think I touched upon that topic a bit already. Well, I see designer has two type of work. One is the craftsmanship, that making things happen. Then the other side is about facilitating and enabling the better understanding of the context. If you are a typographic designer with the AI involved in it, maybe the need for that type of a design will be reduced in the business world. But on the other hand, I think it doesn't mean the work won't be appreciated. Perhaps that type of work will be more seen as a form of art, right? I think we can also see today when you do painting, it's more of an art. And then also reduce our cognitive load, more focus on what we want to do, what we are interested to do, rather than just doing the part of the manual work produced outcome. Then the other part is what I said about the generative design. It hasn't been yet used in the digital development project, but I think it's a matter of future. How are we going to have that algorithm help us to create different ideas when we identify the different metrics? Yeah, that's one way. And then about validating the outcome from the AI, like we mentioned, the biases we create from the technology, I think there needs much more sophisticated thinking. How will we then evaluate the social impact created by this new technology? But nevertheless, whatever we are predicting or we are speculating, I think it's just a future, a possible future. We will never know what is a reality. And when that reality happens, there's always a piece of unprediction. And I think that's a beauty of the future. And the best way to do it is to adjust our understanding by learning in doing and moving forward for the experiment.
Yeah, wow, great thought. Yeah, I think I would say that the biggest change in my role and the people working just with data in general, data and digital services, would be that we're shifting more from these like processors, because the data is the machines are becoming the processors of the data. So we translate more into the communicators between the data and then the customer, and more in like thinking about the ways in which we can, again, give suggestions on what kind of actions you can take both in the digital world and then in the real world. And I think another thing that I think or hope that we will see even more and more is that when the machines are processing the data, we can put emphasis on this human-to-human communications and really bring together people from really different backgrounds, really different abilities, really different sets of knowledge, and then really hone in on what problems do they have and how can we harness data and digital solutions to improve their lives and make their lives easier. So I think that that's something that we have started to do, but there is a really big way to go, and we can take these digital solutions to really help us bring people from really different backgrounds together and really just improve, make better choices, wiser choices, and improve people's lives.
Yeah, I think we can all sort of agree with Mia there. I think as a data scientist, one of the unseen but very important parts of the work is educating the clients or co-workers, because the techniques that we're using aren't really in widespread use yet, and there's sort of the amount of experience that people have and the maturity of companies is limited right now. So that's a part of the work I don't see sort of becoming less important, at least in the sort of near and medium term. I would also like to emphasize the importance of communication, because I think a lot of the problems that we see, not only in machine learning and AI projects, but in projects in general, are caused by the fact that there's a lack of communication between experts and between the sort of C-suite personnel and the people who are implementing the solutions. So I hope to see more communication between designers and analysts and data scientists and the sort of executive branches as well.
Totally agree. I see that our time is running out. I would love to chat with you about this topic forever and forever, but I think this was our final question. So thank you, Mia. Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Lena.
Let's give the floor to the next speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Lena, Alexander, Mia, and Caroline. Really, really good insights on how data and AI will play a part in the context of DX today and in the future. Now, Antti will introduce the last speaker of today before we move on to the highlights.
Yeah, just a few weeks ago, our company was joined by the new group creative director called Simon Robson. And I must admit that this is one of the talks that I've been anticipating the most because my role as in marketing. And now what Simon is going to address is a really, really important topic. What is the glue tying together the brand of the company and the digital experiences of the company? So I guess there's no better way to end this series than with Simon. Simon, your go.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is indeed Simon Robson and I have recently joined Siili as Group Creative Director working across the Siili Group companies. And it's my pleasure to talk about, the bridge between brand and customer experience. It's something that I've long been interested in. Now I get an opportunity to talk about this. So it's a phrase that has been bandied around quite a lot, but it's not about what brands do particularly. It's not about what they say, it's about what they do, which is very important because that is in itself the experience they're creating. It's vastly important that you have an experience that kind of reflects the services, the attitude that you have. And doing that correctly is very important in this day and age. Because digital experiences now literally define brands. We live in a world where audiences can literally rate brands based purely on the experiences they receive, and they do, as you know. I mean, people are very vocal out there. I read a statistic actually earlier this week that said that 75% of people during the pandemic period have actually changed the brands that they follow and the brands that they interact with in their interactions online. So hugely fickle audience out there that we really need to be able to understand and interact with in such a way that they feel comfortable about the experiences they're receiving, and moreover they speak highly of the brands that they are interacting with. Because meaningful interactions are hugely important. It's not enough just to, like I say, it's not enough just to say that you are creating an experience or to say that you have an attitude as a brand. You need to demonstrate that because people can see through interactions that are not genuine and therefore they don't trust the brands as they move forward with them, as they interact with them moving forward, because it's not enough to be appealing on the surface. One has to be much deeper than that to really kind of foster the conversation and to really get the brand to appeal to the audience. It's your depth of character that really leaves that lasting impression. It's like any person that you interact with. And that's how we have to think about this. Now, it sounds like common sense, but common sense is actually not that common in many ways. And it's really important to be human-centric and think about your audience at the sort of end of the line, as it were. They are they are interacting with you, and they expect a human-like approach, and therefore you should adopt that human-like approach as much as you possibly can, and therefore really talk to people as they are humans. Interacting, it's not just a word, it means that you need to have a two-way conversation. You need to really, have a backwards and forwards conversation. I was reading about Gymshark, a brand that I think you'll be very familiar with. How they interact with their audience is really interesting, to the point of even sharing the data that they derive from their audience back to their audience. So it becomes a really kind of collaborative situation, which is a point also on here. Be supportive. Particularly in these days of COVID-19, brands are looking to see how they can support their audience and really kind of reinforce, their good intentions by actions. Hugely important to be that kind of voice of support in so many ways. Be collaborative, as I said, Gymshark's a good example of that, but there are many examples out there, and again, particularly COVID-19 has given rise to these collaborations that have been for the better good. And I think, we will see much more of that as time progresses. And then, perhaps finally, be real and be yourself always. I mean, showing the kind of warts and all approach is I think, really important. Being humanistic, being real, showing the successes, showing the failures, and really sort of wearing your heart on the sleeve, I think is important, both for B2C brands and B2C and B2B brands for that matter, because then you get the audience's confidence and you get their trust and you get their support and all those good things that are derived from being human-centric and interacting with a person as if they are a real person. Hugely important, but not as well practiced as you might think in many ways. So, like anything, first impressions are vastly important. You only get a certain amount of time to impress your audience, and digital experiences are very important in that, because, like I started the presentation, it's not what you say, it's what you do which convinces, and those first impressions are really, really important, because people discuss this, people talk about this, and they will go on to tell other people how they felt about your brand too. So creating those sensory vibes is very important. How does a brand look and feel, and what vibes do they give off? And I'll get to some examples on that. But creating those lasting memories is hugely, hugely important by doing that. So sensory vibes, even in the B2B context, things like Cisco with their the Park initiative, where they got a situation where people could literally play with their digital innovations in context, or then again Microsoft, where they defined that children were not necessarily always happy in school, so they brought a fun learning environment and created that at the BET show. So there's lots of things that can be done to create those kind of lasting memories. And I've referred to it a little bit as the charm offensive, because you have to demonstrate charisma. This is like any relationship. You have to demonstrate that charisma to get somebody to sort of cherish the moments they spend with you. And when they start to cherish the moments they spend with you, they will fall in love with you, or that's the plan. So you have to be very, very focused on what they see, what they think, what they hear, because that all leads to what they feel. And that's hugely important, this depth of feeling. So there was an opportunity to combine the type of work that Siili are doing and bring into context a lot of what I'm talking about today, and we will continue to do that. We see a whole new opportunity for brands to bring this thinking to bear in order to shape their businesses of the future, and in my case, a new job. I'm 10 days in or something like that. So we've talked about sense of purpose, we've talked about branded utilities, connecting with audiences, and we've been doing that for quite a long time. We've been banging on about this for ages. But creating digital experiences gives us an opportunity to really do that in a wonder and create all these good things in something that is massively compelling and become a key part of people's lives. And this is a really good example with the delivery services, the Deliveroos and the Volts and so on of this world. Look what they have become from simply a food delivery service to more than you kind of ever imagined. They have created these digital experiences that are sort of like, it's almost like the fourth emergency service these days in terms of importance in people's lives. I was talking to a colleague yesterday who was saying that she really enjoys when they come round because you can have a chat with them as well, an actual real person in these days. So, people like these guys, they started doing food delivery, now they're doing clothing and they're doing flowers and they're doing all sorts of things really that, constitute this sort of very special experience that they now offer. So obviously we need to talk about this and after Corona, and let's hope that's sooner rather than later. We're now referring to this as AC, which I think is quite funny. And we're talking about this era that will be after Corona. And I think that it's fair to say that everybody is expecting brands to do something more and interact more and provide better experiences when we come out of this, because we've been so dependent upon digital as our window on the world in everything that we do. So people are expecting a step change, and as I said at the top of the presentation, people are voting with their feet, or rather with their fingers on the keyboards, and there are great expectations for this, and it is being referred to as a new age. And a new age where emotional connections are hugely important. I think, again, with COVID, emotions have been running high, and we expect that from the brands that we interact with, be them in a B2B or a B2C setting, it doesn't matter. How you can sort of trigger people's emotions by sharing your own, and really ramping up these and being human is going to be incredibly important in a future after COVID. You need to celebrate the human side, so you need to look into your business and find where the real human aspects of what you do are. And this can be on any level. If, for example, you are in healthcare, for example, which is a really interesting business at the moment through digital and how they are interacting with patients and so on, you need to see where you need to be human. So if I have a particularly sensitive problem that I need to discuss, I don't necessarily want to do that with a robot, with a bot. I want to do it with a human being. So you need to balance the human side. And I think it's really interesting, the kind of assisted learning or coaching type approach that many businesses are looking to bring in together with their or for their customers. Because I think this type of behavior will be imperative in creating successful digital experiences or brands as a whole in the future. You have to be hyper-local, and I saw a really funny point the other day that most apps are developed for 26-year-olds in Silicon Valley, which really doesn't really cover the whole spectrum of audiences at all. So I think you need to be hyper-local, and to a certain extent you need to focus upon the area that you are talking to, because if a message comes from London or New York and you live in Helsinki, it may lose its relevance. So when you can be local, you should be local, and you should share that in the experiences that you put out there. And you need to keep it real. You need to look through the lens of real people, because let's remember, they are at the end of the internet. And somehow that's, again, really been compounded through the whole situation of working at home and that kind of thing. This awareness that you must think that there are real people at the end of the experiences you create. So those experiences must be particularly catered for your audience, and you must be careful with that and use data to derive the right insights to be able to interact with your people in a real way. And it's a big thing at Siili to be real and create something that is indeed real. And I'm a great subscriber to that. And here's a bit of an example. This is for Dr. Martens, the infamous boots, and really how they carried on through through the COVID situation. Obviously, they make boots, and boots are made for walking, as the song goes. And obviously, you can't do much of that in the current situation. But you have an iconic product like this, which has a lot of furore around it. How do you kind of keep the conversation going for such an iconic product? And what they did really was to engage into community conversations through lockdown and be present as a brand through the experiences that they created. And being present as an experience is hugely important in all of this, because you need to keep the engagement high. And like I say, in the future, I think the same will apply. And they've done this incredibly well through, as they say, through a digital lens. And really interesting to see how more sort of, static brands behave in this kind of situation. It is indeed a pivotal time. And like I said, many people refer to this as a kind of new era. And I believe that digital services, digital experiences, digital interactions, attitude, charisma will define the future success of brands, because, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, the audience is in charge, and that is in B2B or B2C, just the same. And they dictate very much, your success. So you need to have a genuine, authentic experience backing up your products, your services, your point of view. It's hugely important now more than ever. So when making it real, it's really now a time to rethink how you bring to bear your branded utilities, your sense of purpose, how you communicate. For example, if you want to sell something and it needs to be a quick sell, then it is, of course, fine to have a beautifully designed banner that you can just click on and the audience can buy things. I subscribe to that belief too, and I know many others do. But if you're talking about a more involved product or service, then you really should have a meaningful experience to back up what you're saying and to provide examples of what you're saying and to make people really sort of embrace your brand. It's the charisma that you demonstrate, the charm that you reflect, that makes people love your brand and come back to your brand and feel good about working with your brand in a digital or in a physical context. So kind of need to recalibrate and think what is important and think where you can really provide services that sort of reflect what you do and are in line with your future intentions, because you should have a step change. All brands should be looking at the step change that is necessary as we come out of this era into this new digital, new brave world, I hope. And we're using the term digital an awful lot because there was a time when people didn't talk about digital and they talked about media as a whole. But I think digital now has a new sort of purpose and a new meaning, particularly because the fact we've been, surrounded by four walls in our home. And as I said, it's become more the window on the world than perhaps it ever has done before. So keep that in mind moving forward. Not everything will change, but some things will change. But moreover, people's attitudes, I think, will change. And look at it as an opportunity to kind of re-energize. As I gave examples of healthcare and that kind of thing, people are looking at how they can sort of re-energize the business. And this will go through, many of the industry sectors, banking and so on, to really, enjoy this change and take it as an opportunity and introduce the kind of new energy into everything that you do, because people love good experiences. Even when talking about going to a restaurant or going to the theatre or one of those physical experiences we used to do more often, people say it was a great experience. Now, as a brand, you should be really sort of embracing that, celebrating that, and looking what you can do to inform and entertain and surprise and delight in equal measure as you move forward, because there are so many possibilities. And we can talk about this all day, but that would be another meeting. So, real is rare. you may have seen a bit of a theme here because Siili's phrase being make it real is something that I think is really important and a really good sentiment, because like I say, there's been many good intentions and there's been many conversations in the past about bringing in sense of purpose and all that kind of thing. But in reality, the names of brands that do this are still relatively few and far between. So there's a real opportunity to bring a realness to your brand, a sense of reality, and you know, be the brand that you've always wanted to be in terms of how you interact with your consumer base, because it is the time. Like I said, people are fickle, people are voting with their feet, and the expectations now are higher than ever. So I think it's an interesting time we're going through. I think it will be an even more interesting time that we're coming towards as this new era of digital breaks free. So really exciting times. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Simon. I think that concludes the show for today. We've had some really great presentations today, and we thought with Antti to quickly run through our key takeaways for each and every one of those.
And we ate our own medicine. We made the notes.
We did. We did. But yeah, if we take Hannu first, who talked about the journey of Oura and how they are utilizing data for DX, I think even though to talk about data, which we touched upon a lot today, is a really important one. For me, the key takeaway from the first one was that the best experiences are often those that you don't even notice. You can go about your life with a ring on your finger and get really valuable insight on how to live better without really noticing that too much. So that's something to take home. How about Balázs, Antti?
In Balázs's presentation, there were a lot of good takeaways. It's pretty much hard to choose from there, but I'd say that the one thing I guess that was pretty much the key, that always, as we are talking about experiences, we should be able to actually ask, what does this mean in terms of revenue? What does this mean in terms of cost? So not only asking that what does this mean in terms of customer experience, but also to be able and to be brave enough to also address the money. That would be my key takeaway on that one.
Yeah, fully agree there. Then Tia and Juha-Matti, or Juhis, talked about the last mile. And I think something that really struck me is how much attention to detail you need to have these days when there's so many competing services in pretty much any domain. So if you want to succeed and be the best one, you really need to cover the details. But perhaps even more importantly, if you want to succeed in customer experience, everyone in the company really needs to take responsibility and ownership of that and be able to impact the end customer's experience. So that's something to maybe take home and see how you can implement that across your organization.
And moving on from there to Tomi and Jari and their presentation on design system, which I really liked. Especially the animations done with PowerPoint, exceptional work. But I would say that already from the beginning of the presentation, we should remember that buttons are expensive. You shouldn't have an excess of buttons. You should have the right buttons. But that's actually describing really well the idea of doing it efficiently. And thinking what we are doing, but it's not only about the system. I'd say that the thing that they emphasized a lot was the role of cooperation, in a sense that the only way to make the design system work is that we cooperate and we share information, we share best practices, we share the best assets, and we create a system around that. So buttons are expensive.
True that. Yeah, then about the fireside chat, I think we agreed with Antti that pretty much the whole discussion could be summarized again, but as we don't have time, maybe a couple of key takeaways. Really the fact that design and development has huge value in complementing their intuition with data, because sometimes even a really something that you would take as granted doesn't turn out to be that way when you look at the data. But maybe, again, more importantly, AI as a team is something that's coming into everything that we do. And in many contexts, it's already a colleague of sorts. So really something to consider in everything that we do. And once that starts to take form and implement itself across every bits and piece of society, we also have to consider the ethical parts of it, really making sure that in development and operating these systems, we have the ethical consideration present.
Moving on to the last presentation that we just heard from Simon Robson. Thank you once again, Simon. I'd say that there were two words that I would put emphasis on. One was the human side of things. Simon kept on coming back on the fact that we should consider that there's a human being at the end of the line, and we shouldn't forget them. And at the same time, this being real is rare. Real is rare. I'd say that it reflects pretty well with the wording that we chose last year, that make it real. It's all about being real to the people. That kind of summarizes it well. Well, that was the first Spring Summit. So I guess now it's time for the classic call to action.
Yeah. Thank you also from my part to all of the presenters and of course all the participants. It was really good to have you for such a long time. And yeah, as a next step, we will send you an email with the recording so you can revisit some of the talks when you feel that they are valuable in whatever you're working on. Feel free to share it widely to your colleagues and whoever you feel might have an interest in these topics. And most importantly, whenever you're working with anything relating to digital experience broadly and you find yourself looking for a sparring partner, feel free to contact us. We're just a phone call or an email away, and we're really, really eager to work together with you to create world-class digital experiences.
I thought what would be the great way to end this presentation. As it is springtime, we could always borrow a bit from a song. So if you are developing digital experiences during springtime, remember to wear some flowers in your head.
Exactly.
This is the best way to end this. Thank you once again for each and every one of you presenting, each and every one of you participating in the event. See you in next one we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.